Good morning. We thank you for coming out this morning. This is an opportunity for us to brief you on a case that our detectives has been working for 8 to 9 months. A very tedious case. They've worked through several different investigative leads to get us to where we're at today. It involves a double homicide case, two cases independently but coming together during their investigation. Our Chief of Detectives, Sam Taylor, will brief you on the details of the case in a moment. I just want to take an opportunity to not only not only thank our detectives and our lab folks that spent the time to investigate this, to start and begin a little bit of closure for this family, both these families, but also our partners as well. Our State Attorney's Office, it's been in step with our investigators since the beginning of this. Of course, our partners at FDLE at their lab and our Sheriff's Office as well. As you get the details of this case, you will see it's a case that's spanned quite a few months, took quite a bit of time to start to bring this suspect to justice. It is a case that we often want to close quickly because the quicker we close it, the quicker the family can begin to heal. But this is one of those cases that took a lot of forensic work, a lot of lab work to get us where we are here today. So without any further, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Detective Sam Taylor to give you the details of the case. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for coming this morning. I want to walk you through a timeline of what occurred here. Keep in mind these were two separate missing person cases in two separate jurisdictions. One was off of Kathleen Road at the Polk County Sheriff's Office jurisdiction, and one was at the Lakeland Police Department, was our jurisdiction. So these were two separate, independent missing person cases that the more we got into the forensic and the evidence of it, we came to the same conclusion that the same individual murdered both of these victims. So with that, let me walk you through a timeline real quick, and then we'll take questions afterwards. So just 9 months ago, the Lakeland Police Department, the Polk County Sheriff's Office had separate missing persons cases that sadly ended in the death of two people. We want to provide you with an update of both cases that initially we had no inclination that were at all related, but now believe were perpetrated by the same person. For the past 9 months, our detectives, forensics experts, and partners with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and the State Attorney's Office have all been working together to bring the person responsible for the deaths of Takeria Adderley and Ricky Kimball to justice. Our detectives have followed numerous leads, executed dozens of search warrants, reviewed hours of surveillance footage, and interviewed many witnesses. And let me walk you through a little bit of what they've done today. This is a timeline. So starting in June of 2020, June of last year, Ricky Kimball, age 65, was last seen on security camera video by co-workers picking up trash in the parking lot of the Circle K located at 4415 Kathleen Road a little after 1 a.m. A missing persons report was filed with the Polk County Sheriff's Office. His truck remained in the parking lot and was never moved, so we knew that he didn't drive away. Takeria Adderley, 22, was reported missing to the Lakeland Police Department on the same date, June 30th, at about 9:15 p.m. She had missed a meeting with her family member earlier that day and was not answering her telephone. Through cell phone records, detectives would later learn that the last phone call Miss Adderley had in the early morning hours of June 30th was to LaDevin Cottingham at about 2:06 in the morning. That's a little more than an hour from the time that Mr. Kimball went missing. The two knew each other and were connected through a family relationship. On July 2nd, Ricky Kimball's body was discovered in a wooded area off East Bella Vista Street in Lakeland, approximately 4 miles from the Circle K. LPD took over the investigation given the location of Mr. Kimball's remains. At the time, a body was examined and a manner of death could not be immediately determined. July 4th of 2020, our suspect, Mr. Cottingham, committed an armed home invasion robbery in the 1800 block of Elliott Street in Lakeland, which is a short distance from the residence where he lived on Compson Place. Cottingham is accused of assaulting two occupants of the residence who were both personally known to him at gunpoint and stole the vehicle and fled to Fort Myers. On July 7th, Miss Adderley's abandoned car was located in the Eden Park area of Lakeland with bloodstains inside and outside of the vehicle. A person of interest was located and charged for the grand theft, the burglary of her vehicle, and tampering with evidence. Although the suspect admitted to taking the car from the Hillsborough Street address where it was eventually dumped by Mr. Cottingham, he denied knowing or having anything to do with Adderley's disappearance. During the investigation, detectives were able to locate additional surveillance footage from the June 30th date when both Mr. Kimball and Miss Adderley went missing that showed Miss Adderley's vehicle being driven to the Hillsborough Street and moving out of camera range. Within 1 minute, a person who was later identified by multiple people as Cottingham was seen walking past Hillsborough Avenue with no shirt and no shoes and carrying a bag. On July 29th, Miss Adderley's remains were located in a heavily vegetated area off the side of the road near West Bella Vista Street, about 3/10 of a mile from where our suspect resided. Her manner of death was immediately ruled a homicide, as evidence showed that she had been shot one time in the back of the head. Cottingham was arrested after a warrant was obtained for the home invasion robbery that I spoke about earlier that he committed on July 4th on the 1800 block of East Elliott Street. That was on August 2nd. Cottingham was interviewed by detectives after his arrest for that outstanding warrant, and during the interview, when he was confronted with the cell phone evidence of his contact with Miss Adderley on June 30th, he denied any involvement in her death, but admitted that he did speak with her on the phone. A witness was obtained through going through Cottingham's phone records who advised that she had been contacted by Cottingham on the morning of June 30th and said he sounded panicked and needed her to pick him up. She picked him up at the South Florida address just down from the Hillsborough Avenue location where Miss Adderley's vehicle was dumped. He was wearing only his underwear and carrying a brown paper bag and that contained a handgun. On September 2nd, the medical examiner advised detectives that Mr. Kimball's manner of death was a homicide as a result of strangulation. Further tracing of cell phone records developed multiple additional witnesses and locations of cell phone pings from Cottingham's phone. Detectives learned that Cottingham's phone was hitting on a cell phone tower near the area of Circle K in the early morning hours of June 30th. That's the first time that we had connected those two. Before that, they were two separate missing persons cases that were now homicide investigations, but that was the first time that detectives began to suspect that the same guy was involved in the disappearance of both Mr. Kimball and Miss Addington. In March of this year, Lakeland investigators received the lab results back from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement confirming that DNA found inside of Miss Adderley's vehicle did in fact belong to Mr. Kimball, indicating that he had been inside Adderley's vehicle at some point before his body was discarded. It is believed that Cottingham murdered Mr. Kimball first, called Miss Adderley hoping that she would assist him in some way, and when she declined, he killed Miss Adderley and disposed of both bodies in different locations and dumping Miss Adderley's vehicle off South Florida Avenue. On March 25th, which was yesterday, the results of this 9-month investigation was officially presented to the grand jury. They agreed with our findings and formally indicted LaDevin Cottingham on the following charges: 2 counts of first-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, false imprisonment, armed robbery with a firearm, armed kidnapping, armed burglary of a vehicle, grand theft of a motor vehicle, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Cottingham had recently been released from the Florida State Prison about 2 weeks prior to all these events occurring. He was released June 15th of 2020. After having served 3 years and 4 months for an armed burglary and grand theft charge, grand theft of a firearm, and grand theft of a motor vehicle. Ms. Carrie Adderley was a vibrant 22-year-old woman who was just beginning her adult life. She responded to a person who called her that she knew and trusted, and he killed her. Ricky Kimball was a beloved member of the Kathleen Road Circle K team. A lot of our detectives knew him, a lot of detectives that live up in that area, and some of our civilian folks that come to work and get called out early in the morning would stop at the Circle K and have coffee, and they always had a kind word for him and always told him, you know, hey, be safe out there. So we personally knew him. So he always had a smile, greeted everyone with a smile, and both of them should still be with us today, if not for the actions of Mr. Cottingham. So with that, I will answer any questions that you have and try to fill in some of the blanks. I know there's a lot of information, there's a lot of dates and times on that, so you have questions. We have family members here, as you can see. As you can see in the back of the room is filled with Mrs. Adderley's family members. They are been very supportive throughout the entire investigation. We appreciate their support. We're sorry for their loss. Obviously, she was loved, as you can tell by the amount of people that are here to support her. Mr. Kimball's family are mostly in the Northeast, and they could not be here today, but they did ask the detective stand up there in his stead. Particularly Detective Seeley is standing here in support of Mr. Kimball's family. So,
Chief, what was his motive in killing Mr. Kimball, allegedly?
we'll never know for sure. We can assume that it was robbery, but we don't know. We don't know that for a fact. We don't know for sure. We do know that Mr. Kimball was in the parking lot. He's on surveillance video camera. He stepped out to take a break. He's seen, and you can see a person come next to him with a surveillance, and they walk out of view of the camera, and that's the last time he's seen. His vehicle was located at the scene, so Cottingham did not take his vehicle.
Can we get the surveillance tape?
At some point, we'll get that to you. Sure.
Not today, though?
Probably not today.
Do you believe that was Cottington though at the Circle K?
We do.
leading-
We do. Yeah. You can't tell it from the video. I don't think the video is that clear, but we believe that was him. His cell phone records put him in that area at the time he went missing. This was a case where, as I said, these were two independent missing persons investigations that continued until we were able to get the cell phone records, which takes time, and then we found out that, this guy, the detectives going through the cell phone records determined, we have this missing person who's now a victim of a homicide, Mr. Kimball, and this guy, Cottingham, who we were looking at in the Adderley case, his cell phone records show that he was in that area when this guy went missing, and that was the first indication that we had that this guy had something to do with that homicide as well. So
Did DNA link the two cases as well?
his DNA was found in when we recovered her vehicle in Eden Park. There was blood in the front part of the car. There was quite a bit of blood in the back passenger seat of the floorboard of the vehicle that came back to an unknown male. We had that tested. We didn't know who that belonged to, but when we saw the cell phone records, obviously, then we sent off a lab request that to be compared to Mr. Kimball, and then when the lab results came back in March of this year, it was in fact his blood. That puts him in the car, if that answers your question.
Do you know if he just randomly met Mr. Kimball, or did he know the previous?
There's no indication that he knew him before that, but there's no indication that Takiria and Mr. Kimball knew each other. That we've been able to find no connection between those two, so we don't think that he knew him.
So it's potentially just a random robbery?
That's what it appears right now, unless some additional information comes forward. Yeah.
What has he said to detectives about these two cases?
Not a whole lot. He's made some admissions. I wouldn't classify them as confessions. I mean, this guy's a predator now, so make no mistake, this guy is absolutely a predator. So, but he thinks he's smarter than everybody else in the room, for the most part, and but he's in the county jail and facing all these charges. So he didn't say a whole lot. If that answers your question.
Seems like the streets are a lot safer. This guy's just a cold-blooded killer, it seems like.
This guy had just got out of prison 2 weeks before. Remember, I told you, for an armed burglary charge. He'd been out into society for 2 weeks, and when these crimes occurred. So not only did he kill these two folks that were innocent victims, had absolutely nothing, did nothing to provoke him, nothing to cause their death. He also committed the armed robbery to get out of town because he needed a vehicle to get out of town. So he committed an armed robbery of folks that he knows. That's what, it makes no sense. He home invasion, armed robbery of people that he knew to grab their car and go down to Fort Myers. So
Takiria did the right thing by saying, no, I'm not going to help you. Cover up this murder.
yes, ma'am. That's as near as we can tell. Yeah, he called her at 2:06 a.m. According to the cell phone records, in hopes that probably she would come help him in some way. We feel like Mr. Kimball was already dead, and he either told her that fact or asked for her help, and she declined, and that's the reason he killed her.
So he went after her, or did she meet up with him somewhere?
She drove her car and met him somewhere. That's how he ended up getting her car. That's him on video dumping the car. It's on Hillsborough Avenue, right behind Midas there. He dumped that car. That's him. We had several witnesses that identified that's him walking with the bag over his shoulder, and he stripped all of his clothes off because he probably had blood on the clothes from committing the two homicides.
Does someone from the Adderley family, would they like to come up and speak?
Probably have someone that would be happy to answer questions. You guys got a picture of this, right?
Yep, yes. Thank you.
You good?
Before you say anything, can you just us your name, your first, your last, spell it please. And are you the Adderley family that's related to Nat Adderley?
I don't know in that.
Okay. He's a famous jazz musician and they lived in Lakeland and they still have kin here. Anyway, can you just do your name first, last, and spell it please?
Yes, my name is Brenda McLean. Last name spelling MC,CLAIN. I'm Takiria's grandmother, and this is my grandson, Takiria's brother, Dontrell Kennedy. And first of all, I just want to say good morning, everyone, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the Kimball family as well that had a loss, and just let everyone know that we thank you for your thoughts and your prayers and your support when everyone was out looking for Takiria. And just know she was an amazing young lady. She would go and she would help anyone. And that's just who she was. She would, at the drop of a dime, you see, she went and she tried to help someone, and they didn't appreciate her help. Instead, they took her life. But just know that she's loved, and her memory will continue to live on through us. And we ask that you continue to pray for us. We still have a long ways to go to get this conviction. And we just ask that you pray for us, continue to keep us lifted up in prayer. Thank you.
How did she know Covington? Because I mean,
Potty.
My understanding, that's her half-brother. I'm not sure how it goes. Her mother thought that that was her father. And turns out it was another father. So it was, according to blood work, it ended up being not her father. But they began to know each other and got close somewhat.
What were Takiria's goals in life? What did she want to do?
She loved driving and helping people. Her goals was what she did. She graduated. She had a kind of rough upbringing, but yet she overcame all of it, and she got her diploma, and at the time she was driving for Uber, and she just loved driving. She loved people, and that was her family. She loved family and doing things with family. And other than that, I'm not aware of any other goals, but she just loved to drive, and she loved to get out and explore different things.
She wanted her own family probably someday.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am.
I know you
So-
said you have a long way to go to get the conviction, but does this give the family any type of closure, any type of relief at all to know that this man is at least off the street?
Yes, it does. For the simple reason now her mom can be at peace somewhat and still know that she has to be strong and continue to see this through to make sure justice is done for Takiria. Okay.
We're so sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All right, that'll be the end of it. I do want to, I would be remiss if I didn't compliment all the detectives that worked a lot of long hours on this case. Two of them are standing up here today, but they're not the only two. There's some others in the back of the room as well. Our lab folks, these cases are horrific to work, especially when you've had, a victim that's been exposed to the elements for a long period of time. So they're very tough to work, but this was a 9-month-long investigation that resulted in this guy being arrested and taken off the street. And as I referred to, this guy is absolutely a predator, and he's exactly where he needs to be. But I would be remiss if I didn't compliment the detectives for hanging in there. And keep in mind, this is during last year now when COVID was going on and things were hit and miss. And then a month after that, we had the July 19th, we had the Dominguez case where the young lady was shot through the door. So there's a lot of things going on, but they persevered, they hung in there, and they stayed with it, and continued to do probably over 20 search warrants with phones and computers and tracking down video. There's absolutely a lot of legwork that goes in there. So I'm very proud of the efforts that they put into it. So if you guys don't have any other questions, thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it.